Kevin Lentz, the pastor here of Trinity Badger Ranch. I want to thank you for joining me for another Monday devotion. On Mondays, we do a sermon recap from yesterday, and yesterday was Pentecost. Very important day in the history of the church, and every year we remember it and celebrate it because it is so, again, very important. So for the text, I looked at the Pentecost account from Acts chapter 2, not the whole thing, but just the first 4 verses. And they read, Acts 2, verses 1 to 4, "When the day of Pentecost came, they were all together in one place. Suddenly a sound like the blowing of a violent wind came from heaven and filled the whole house where they were sitting. And so it seemed to be tongues of fire that separated and came to rest on each of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other tongues as the Spirit enabled them." Again, now Pentecost takes place 50 days after the resurrection. It's always on a Sunday, or 10 days after the ascension. The ascension is always on a Thursday, so this is also, again, 10 days later, falling on a Sunday. And the account of the Holy Spirit being poured out on God's people in the first century is a beautiful event. Jesus foretold while he was with the disciples, he brought them into grief. He said, I'm going to leave you soon. And when he said that, it made them sorrowful. But he continued, but if I go, then I can send to you the Holy Spirit. If I don't go, I can't send the Spirit to you. So it was a good thing Jesus left. I'm sure it was sad when he had his ascension, but he would then pass the torch, if you will. I mean, the ministry was about him, the time being, his life, his work, his words, his power, his cross, his resurrection, where salvation is and nowhere else. But now that that work had been fully completed and he had ascended back home, now the time had come for the Holy Spirit to come into the world, which he did. And again, the power is just so visible. People speaking in languages that everybody, let's say the apostle's name, let's say Peter and his brother Andrew. Well, maybe Peter could speak Russian, just as an example, and Andrew could speak Spanish. I mean, these uneducated fishermen were able to speak in foreign languages they'd never studied for the purpose of reaching the people that day, because Jerusalem was crowded with out-of-towners with the gospel of Jesus Christ. A fantastic event. There was also, and this must have been really something to see, on the heads of all that were gathered there, flames, burning on top of the head, yet not singeing them or scorching them, probably not even hot or hurting them whatsoever, burning them whatsoever. It was just a way for the Holy Spirit to show his power. He came to them in the visibility of tongues of fire on their head. There was also at that time a great sound of a mighty rushing wind. Now the word spirit and wind are the same word in the Greek and Hebrew languages. And so we give thanks that when we think about the wind of God, the breath of God, that's really the Spirit of God, because Jesus has said elsewhere that the Spirit moves about. You don't know where it comes from. You don't know where he's going. He said that's just like the wind, he said. And so the Spirit, when he came on that Pentecost, there was a sound accompanying him of a mighty wind, which would bring into people's mind the Spirit himself. So Pentecost is a fantastic celebration. We give thanks to God for it. We also know that we can't believe in God if the Spirit doesn't generate faith within us. He brings us to faith. He sustains it. And we're so very thankful that when we call ourselves the believing children of God, that's credit to God, the Holy Spirit. But he is the one who comes to us through the sacraments, through the Word, making God's will known to us, who Christ is, what God has done for us. So again, we don't know God, not from the Holy Spirit. But knowing God as we do, we thank God for all his goodness, but also we thank God, the Holy Spirit, for bringing us and sustaining our faith. A blessed event in the lives of God's people. So thanks you for joining me here this morning. I pray you had a wonderful Sunday morning as well, and we'll talk to you again. God bless. Bye-bye.